Dato' Ambiga, do you confirm that your testimony to the tribunal today shall be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Dato' Ambiga, you have signed this statutory declaration, although being a Sunday, you have not had it affirmed. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
Do you undertake to ensure that the tribunal will be furnished with an affirmed copy of the statutory declaration?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. For the record, you are Ambiga Anak Perempuan Srinivasan.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell us your profession, current profession?
I am an advocate and solicitor.
But perhaps nowadays you are more identified with another sort of, within parenthesis, profession, if you like. You are co-chairperson of,
Bersih 2.0, that's correct.
and for the record, can you tell us what it is?
Bersih 2.0 is a citizens' movement for clean and fair elections.
Now this Bersih started quite sort of identified at the moment, because I think we can proceed quite quickly to the rest. And then you became co-chair of Bersih in 2010.
That's correct.
And then you say it was rebranded as Bersih 2.0.
Yes.
What is rebranding involved?
Rebranding, well, it changed its form somewhat. It became completely civil society movement, so political parties were not involved in the running of the organization.
So now it's an entirely civil society movement
Yes,
of ordinary citizens.
yes.
And Bersih 2.0 is various non-governmental organizations.
Yes.
Do you know roughly how many there are?
Approximately, I mean, obviously you have people coming in and going, but approximately 82.
82. That's a rather large amount, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Now, shortly after you became co-chair, who's the other chair? There's a co-chair means?
The co-chair is Pak Samad Said, Dato' Samad Said, who's here, present here today, is the other co-chair.
I see. Yes, of course, we recognize his...
Yes, in the electoral system. But clearly it needed reform. I think the Bersih rally in 2007 had certain demands, and it was clear that many people were disgruntled about the system. I think the 2008 election result, which made quite a difference, actually made people realize that their votes could make a difference. So I think it was the people's feeling that they wanted a system where their vote would count.
And that implies that up to that point, there were concerns that votes were not being really translated into the will of the people in a free and fair manner.
That's so.
Now, you had, therefore, the logical thing to do was to meet up with the institution in charge of the Election Commission, was it not?
Yes.
And you had meetings like this kind?
Well, we had that one meeting where we met them. We were supposed to meet them again, actually, but it didn't happen because of the Sarawak state elections. But we did have one rather long involved meeting with them, but we have met them subsequently at various fora, and we've exchanged views with them, yes.
Maybe you can give us a flavor of the meeting for the panel's understanding. How was it? Was it constructive? Was it...
Well, it was very cordial, I will say that. I'm not sure constructive is the right word, but it was certainly very cordial, living in the longhouses, because the Tuai Rumah has a lot of sway over the people living there. So in that sense, some of the things that we saw, we were quite horrified by some of the things that we saw in Sarawak. So we realized after Sarawak that in fact we were in trouble where the electoral system was concerned, because what we were concerned about is whatever happened in Sarawak can be translated into our general elections.
Now, just a small clarification. You said Tuai Rumah for the benefit of our...
Sorry, it's explained.
It's village head.
Village head, that's right.
Village
it's
head.
The,
or
it's the, yeah, longhouse
the
head.
longhouse chiefs, as
Chiefs.
it were. All right. Now, so here you were concerned about the elections, the inequities in the electoral system there, wanting to improve it, no doubt in a constructive way. But what happened to you vis-a-vis the Sarawak state government?
I was stopped from entering the Sarawak state, or Sarawak, the day before the elections. I was banned and I was turned back and sent back courtesy of the Sarawak state, back home. So I was not allowed to enter.
So you're told not to improve other people's electoral system.
Well, it's ours.
Yes. That's the important
But
thing.
that seemed to be the message, yes.
Yes. Okay, then you, after that, you say in your paragraph,
Campaigning that was going on left a lot to be desired. So
and again,
those were the 8 demands.
again to clarify for our international panel, when you say MACC means what?
Sorry, is the anti-corruption agency, Malaysian anti-corruption agency.
And you then had a press statement of 19th June 2011, which appears at your page 19 of your exhibit.
Yes, that's correct.
And this is on the launch of Perhimpunan. Perhaps you can translate that.
Yes, it's gathering or rally, Perhimpunan, or assembly, actually. And that was our 9th July 2011 public assembly to ask for free and fair elections. That was the first time I was involved in a rally for free and fair elections. So our press statement in relation to that is at page 19, and that goes up to 23.
So you were talking about rallies and assemblies, as you say. And if I could kindly invite your attention to page 21,
Yes.
and you say just below the paragraph, below Stop Dirty Politics, the paragraph immediately following that,
Yes.
skip that immediate paragraph.
And so they made it very, very difficult for us. Ultimately, they agreed to allow us a stadium, but when we, and we had already said we wanted Stadium Merdeka, and there was then a problem about Stadium Merdeka. It's a long story, but to cut it short. So we said we will walk to as close to Stadium Merdeka as we can get. So there was a little bit of problem with that, where the government was concerned. They blocked the roads going into KL. It was a huge mess. I myself was caught in a tunnel and tear gassed, and with a whole load of people, including Pak Samad, who walked to the palace barefoot, trying to get our memorandum across to the king. Anyway, so that was a little bit of the drama, but ultimately I was surprised to learn that, because I was arrested, and I was very surprised to learn that almost 50,000 people had come out despite the blocks that were put
So,
in their path.
are you asking us to believe that, in fact, the government said that this is an illegal rally,
Yes.
and did not, and asked people not to attend this rally?
Oh yes, I think there was a lot of statements made in the press, and people were encouraged not.
Rally on 9 July 2011. Is that another rally? Is it July, or is that a mistake?
There's another rally in 2012,
Oh.
28th April. That was
Okay,
Bersih
so
3.
but just to correct that,
What?
paragraph 10.
No, but that's correct.
That's correct, no? Oh, I see. The press statement was 19th June. Okay. All right. So after that rally, the Prime Minister announced, so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, for the first time, and this was historic, the Prime Minister set up a parliamentary select committee on electoral reform, and we welcomed that. That's a positive move. And the PSC actually sat, they deliberated, we presented our paper there, and they came out with several recommendations. And I will be putting forward, because it's in Bahasa, we will be translating and putting forward the recommendations made by the PSC in due course before
Okay.
the panel.
Okay, so you'll be having it translated, in other words,
Yes.
huh? And then the PSC had, you say, what happened then to the PSC?
Well, the PSC issued its recommendations, and in fact, we put in our responses to those recommendations, and that you will see at page 29 of the bundle. We responded
Yes,
to...
slowly,
Yes.
let me get to page 29,
Sorry.
yes. So there were there was, in other words, the parliamentary committee met. Now this parliamentary select committee, did it consist?
It already submitted a detailed proposal for how it should be done. Postal voting, we asked for that to be strengthened. We actually were very unhappy that they had increased the categories of people who were going to be postal voters because it is such an insecure system. And we did say that really there was no reason why most of those categories couldn't have voted on polling day. Distance voting, I mean, that's a similar concept. The pre-registration of citizens, that's a small point. We were of the view that's not necessary. Date of dissolution of parliament, we had supported the naming, that there be a fixed term. In other words, that there be a fixed term and everyone knows when elections is going to be.
Just a second, if you come back to your item 4, you
Yes.
are suggesting proposals for automatic
Yes.
registration. What did you mean by that?
That means when you reach 18, we were also proposing that the voting age should be reduced to 18. So the minute you attain 18, you should automatically be registered as a voter. And because in our country we have the identity card system, it's very easy to do. It's very easy to do and very easy to implement.
Yes, proceed then.
So, date of dissolution of parliament, we wanted it fixed so that we're not left as we were in the last 13 general elections waiting, campaigning. We saw campaigning for more than 12 months because obviously we would want that. So we supported the issue of strengthening of the election commission. I would also add that we would want to see an election commission that is not made up of civil servants, because that's currently what our problem is, I believe. And we think that they should be completely independent from parliament and independent from the political parties. Then of course, and also civil society should have a role in the appointments process. There should be a system whereby civil society can actually make recommendations as to who should be on the election commission. Then the 17...
Before that, and you
Yes.
also, I note here that you say that the Prime Minister should not be involved in
Yes.
appointing people to the Election Commission.
Yes, that's absolutely critical, I think.
Yes. Okay, proceed.
So then 17, widening elections academy. These are all long-term issues. Balanced electoral delineation. That is something I think honourable members of panel have already heard, what the problems with our boundaries, electoral boundaries are. And of course, funding to political parties. We were in support of that because at this point in time, and I think one of the witnesses mentioned it yesterday, as far as federal goes, opposition gets, in fact, we were asking for that, but they failed to make that recommendation. So we saw this as an exercise partially to placate, but I don't want to be disrespectful to the panel because I think they did a lot of work in fairness to them. I think they did come up with recommendations, but they missed the key recommendation, which was that this has to be done before the 13th general elections.
So the Election Commission did not implement even the recommendations, all the recommendations of PSC they did not implement.
Not all.
Yeah.
Some they did, like indelible ink, badly, but they did. Yeah. But key ones they didn't, like
Yeah.
the electoral roll, they didn't really. And in fact, one of the members, if I can just, this is a good place perhaps to mention it, sorry to,
Okay, go on.
is one of the members of the, of the PSC actually came out and said that something has to be done about the electoral roll. Why aren't you getting on with doing something about it? And this is at page 130 of my bundle. It's a different exhibit, but I would just like to point that out because we're talking of a member of the PSC. This is an article at page 130. This is September 15, 2012. And in the second half of that article, 2012 PSC report comes out, no stipulation for date on which it must be implemented. The recommendations must be implemented. We had to do something, otherwise we knew that we were going to face an election which had problems. And we were not wrong, because I pointed out Anthony Loke in September saying, hey, what are you guys doing? You're not cleaning up the role. So that's why we had that rally.
Yes, and where was this rally allowed, permitted?
Okay, it's a good question. It was. We were allowed to gather at certain points, and in fact, more than 200,000 people gathered. But we were not allowed to step into Merdeka Square, which is Independence Square, which is our square. We were not allowed to step in there. A court order was issued, and so you had 200,000 people surrounding this patch of
just
green.
again, because
Yes.
there are members of the international panel.
Yes.
So just again, so you had issued a call for a rally
Yes.
in a place called Merdeka Square.
Yes.
And this is right in the center of the city, a huge square where a lot of very important functions are usually held, generally by the people, government, and so on.
Yes.
Right. And there's a big, huge field there. Yes. In fact, our Merdeka celebrations are always held there.
Yes.
Our Independent Merdeka stands for Independence Celebration.
Penal code, and it was basically, it's a good question actually, I think it's the police, and it was against me, and I think there was a general, it's like a general notice to the public, do not take part in this rally.
Yeah. No, it's just, I ask you this because I find it very strange that, you know, that the police would go out to get a court order to prevent people from going into a place. I think it's a bit unusual, is it not?
It's not actually, they do that. I mean, somebody found this provision and they were doing it for 2 or 3 years before this rally. But to me, the order should never have been made.
Okay, and then this order was made and they prevented you from going into that square.
Yes, but they didn't stop us gathering out around the square at various points around the square, which is what we did.
Also, the order did not prohibit you from
No.
doing that.
No.
So, as a
By the very fact that they restricted us just from going into that square meant we could be everywhere else.
yes,
And we were.
so that's how-
And the thing is that, but there was a lot of violence.
no, just a
subsequently-
second.
sorry, okay.
Slowly. But you said this was a mass sit-in
Yes,
called Duduk Bantah,
that's right.
sit-in to protest, and a lot of people.
My only my objection to it still is that they have declared street protests illegal. So you're fine, you want to sit in a hall or stadium, you can go ahead, but you cannot walk the streets.
So we are okay here today.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. And then, but you are between the issue of the report and, of course, May 2013, you say here that you carried on with advocacy work.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, we realized that the agenda for free and fair elections perhaps was not reaching out to a lot of people outside Kuala Lumpur. A lot of the urban population appreciated it. So we did a lot of advocacy work, and it's actually the team headed by Maria, who's here as well, Maria Chin Abdullah, the secretariat, actually organized talks and various gatherings to explain what our agenda was.
And then you say that you went to the urban areas as well, but this, I noticed along the line reading your exhibits, you also talk about a global movement.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Well, we're very proud of Global Bersih. We didn't have them. I thought it's only right that we put in, and this is AS9, and it appears at page 180. There are 2 booklets there. One that it goes from 180 to,
231.
yes, And then there's a
Just
second one
wait,
after that.
sorry.
Yes, sorry.
The first booklet is from undated, I think, 180 to 212, called, if I could respectfully invite the panel's attention to this. It says summary of the EC's clarification on the issues of the electoral roll and the improvement of electoral process. And then there is a second booklet which I have delivered to your honors during the break, which is the truth behind the accusation and lies towards the Election Commission. Are these the two documents you're referring
Yes,
to?
yes.
Yes.
They pretty much cover the same issues over and over again. I have got a colleague of mine. Yeah, that's the first one. And if you look at, those are the issues that they covered. And can I just touch on a couple of issues?
Yes, please.
From here,
Yes, please.
if I may.
Yes.
See, therefore, the issue that the EC takes a hands-off approach over the granting of MICAT to foreigners does not arise. It is not under the jurisdiction of the EC. For the benefit of our foreign panelists, the National Registration Department, or JPN, Jabatan Pendaftaran, is the organization that issues, or the government agency that issues the identity card. So what they're trying to say here is, because we don't issue those cards, we're not responsible for registration of foreigners. So, and what they're saying here is, as long as they issue the identity cards, we will register them. We don't look behind the identity card. So we don't accept that as a reasonable excuse, because the EC is the sole custodian of the electoral roll. They cannot say that that is not our job. We are just registering. If the JPN says you have to register, we will register. So we don't accept this as an explanation. So that's just by way of example. Yes. Sure.
Did this go with the fact that you wanted the electoral roll to be cleaned up as well?
Everything. That's why it is not just a question of electoral roll, because it's so intrinsically tied up, the identity card and the election commission. The JPN needs a shake-up as well. There's no doubt about that, because that's where the problem starts, and that's what the EC is saying. It's not me, it's them. But is that good enough? I will argue later that it's not, because they are constitutional body.
Well, we're not here to argue. I'm not here to argue. We're not here to argue, but to listen to your
Sure.
Your submission.
Just on the Constitution, based on the Constitution.
You know, witness, their explanation here, matters relating to agents to citizenship under somebody else's, and therefore it's not a hands-off approach, as this says. Now, you are familiar with Article 1152 of the Federal Constitution, which says, and maybe I can read it to you. I think you should know it by heart, this particular provision by now.
I
it's
do.
on election.
I do.
It's page 139.
Yeah.
So 115, assistance to election commission, although it could be a narrow assistance, but if you look at 115, it's on the screen actually.
Be removed from office except on the like grounds and in the like manner as a judge of the federal court. So they have the standing of a judge of the federal court, which is precisely why I don't buy their arguments that they don't have the power.
Is that very secure?
It's more difficult to remove them.
Difficult?
It has to go to Parliament.
Yeah, but I mean, in all seriousness, the comment made by His Honor,
Yes.
what you're saying really is that the status is of that same kind.
Yes.
And therefore, this has to be accorded that kind of status, although we recognize that more judges have been removed from our courts than most democratic countries in the world combined in a very short space of time. So really, the point is important, because the panel is going to suggest reforms as well. So I'm glad you flagged this because this will also then could lead to even an improvement of the kind of provisions that exist, bearing in mind the history of this country in relation to this outcome of certain matters under the Constitution itself.
Yeah, we can't do anything about it, that type of thing. And one of the issues that they've also raised is that if because NRD issues an IC, when a person dies, they say, go and report to NRD, and then NRD will let us know. But we said it's automatic, because under our law, you can't get a burial permit, etc., unless all the authorities are informed. So they are suggesting that the family of the deceased have to go and tell everybody the deceased has died before they will remove someone from the roll, which doesn't make sense with our system of identity cards. So that's another tightening of the system that is sorely needed. They know the issue. It's not that they don't know the issue. And to me, it's very easy to tweak and to solve. The issue, sorry, shall I move on?
Yes, please.
The overseas votes is another issue that I have raised. And this appears at, at para 16, I mentioned that the government of Malaysia sought to declare us illegal, unlawful society, but in fact the High Court quashed that order of the minister. Para 17, I talk about the overseas vote, and I want to make, and here at AS2, 5 years. Only then are you eligible. So suddenly, out of the blue, they impose a condition, and we say this is a condition that is unconstitutional, because with one, so what they're doing is they're giving someone 5 months. Of course, we didn't know then the elections were going to be in May. It could have been in March. You're giving them 3 months to fulfill that condition. So they actually took away, they disenfranchised voters. I don't know how many exactly, but they disenfranchised many overseas Malaysians by imposing that condition. They ought to have waited until after GE13 before doing that. The system is set out there in his question answer, but essentially the postal vote comes back to Malaysia in diplomatic bags. They can actually post it back themselves, or it comes back in diplomatic bags. You again have the issue of security of the postal vote. So that's the other thing about the postal vote. Then we have the issue of foreign voters. All our other issues are in the exhibits there. Issue of foreign voters. And this is at AS3. A claim was made by the leader of the opposition.
Sorry, this is at page 61.
61.
Yes.
Apologies. A claim was made by the leader of the opposition that, and my reason for producing this is this. There was no clarity in the responses by the party concerned, because all they said is BN friendly, bringing in people from overseas. So we said, look, then give us the evidence and give us the list, tell us where they're voting, and that's the end of the matter. That would have been the end of the matter. But no one was prepared to give us any evidence, because it's easy evidence to provide, and that was our issue. And our issue is, it is the EC who should be investigating this. And all through, our issue has been that the EC just does not investigate all the incidents of illegality, of electoral violence, of electoral offenses. They just do nothing. That's our issue with the EC, and that's why I produce this. As I say, not to prove that this happened. Even the Bangladeshi High Commissioner came out and said, no such thing happened. 40,000 Bangladeshis didn't come, but no one said 40,000 Bangladeshis came. They said foreigners. But it's to show that despite something so serious being raised, the Election Commission does not see fit. Putrajaya has disallowed the Election Commission from preparing guidelines for a caretaker government once Parliament or state legislatures dissolved. So they were taking instructions from the government, which they shouldn't have been. And it is the government that put a stop to the caretaker guidelines, despite the PSC that they set up together with the opposition recommended. It was supposed to have been done within 3 months, I believe.
Yeah, so just again, I think this point is, just to clarify, the PSC, which is a parliamentary body consisting of all parties, recommended a caretaker government guidelines, right?
Yes,
Okay, so this was not done.
not done.
And then the election commission says that the government is not allowing it to have guidelines of this kind.
Yes,
Now, this comes back to that point that you were making. The role, when you talked about judges of the federal court and so on, this suggests, at least in theory, under the federal constitution, that the election commission is a completely independent body which derives its sustenance, support, and existence, establishment from the federal constitution.
yes,
And therefore, it should not be subject to Putrajaya's, which is government's direction. And you are saying this Putrajaya refused bid for caretaker government. They say Putrajaya has disallowed
Independence, if you like, of the election commission. Would
yes.
that be correct?
That would be correct.
Apart, of course, from making recommendations as to see what they will do about it.
Yes.
But since we're on that, Your Honor, if we could go to page 98, because there was actually reports and evidence that they were previously UMNO members, the chair and deputy chair.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
Yes. So that's there. As far as the chair is concerned, that's clear. The deputy chair, there's lack of clarity. But you see, I also challenge that lack of clarity.
Sorry,
Yes.
but being just former UMNO members does not preclude one, if he is of integrity, from once he assumes a position of trust
Yes.
and integrity to operate like one. So that I would say, well, it is one, it may be a matter of perception, but it can be substantiated or dismissed by facts. So yeah, but I note that.
Yes. It's a perception issue, perception
Yeah.
of bias.
You see, just a second, you see, it's a question of conduct being, the perception being reinforced by conduct more than anything else, because by itself, I think there have been, our historical antecedents should not be visited upon us at a later time.
Promise, I think that was the "you help me, I'll help you" line by the Prime Minister that people took offense to in Cebu. So, but as against that, you have the attitude of the EC, and this is in respect of the opposition, and you will see this at page 116A and 117. And I'll say nothing more. I leave it to the panel to draw conclusions. And this one is post-elections, but there's a lot of evidence prior to the elections. But it says Election Commission won't entertain the opposition's complaints about 40,000 phantom voters during the GE13 in May, as it is too busy, Deputy Chief Wan Ahmad Wan Omar said. And then next page, opposition hypocrites, their actions contradict their principles.
Just a second, I know you didn't want us to read, but
Sorry.
I think I would like to read some 116A. You see the whole attitude of the EC when you make complaints to them and so on. They overreach themselves, do they not? For example, he says at paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, he added.
Which page is this?
I'm
Sorry,
at
116A.
116A. 116A.
Yes.
And he says at paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is
and it dismisses a lot of things as being outside its purview. Take, for example, the question of the electoral roll, which is really its responsibility, but it says when it is asked whether, it can delete names of people who are dead or who are missing from, or whose addresses are not correct, it says, I cannot do so because I cannot delete names. I think part of the problem which we need to look at is the whole history of it, because our EC is very highly centralized, and really I think that it is difficult for them to do that because they simply do not know. And I think the problem really is that they have taken this very narrow role and has taken it upon themselves not even to engage with voters in between elections. They do not write to us, they do not tell us where to vote, they don't communicate with us at all as voters. And I think that this is something that we should look at in terms of institutional reform. Maybe it would require expanding the role of the EC and increasing the staff of the EC. But these are important things that they should be doing in order to in a way, make the roles more accurate. Because when they write to people and they don't reply, then they can begin to look into this question of whether they exist, whether they are.
The impartiality of EC. Now we must remember, this is an organization that was accredited by the Election Commission itself to observe the elections. And with regard to under the heading impartiality of EC, this is what he said. The report says, while we acknowledge some inherent structural problems which compromise the independence of the EC, however, we notice that the EC adopted a combative, partisan language while responding to the criticism, and even labeled its critics in negative terms. So it goes beyond the question of saying, oh, you know, I can't do this, I can't do that. They're taking a partisan approach. Yeah, I'll just complete this. One Ahmad had called Bersih to co-chairperson Dato S. Hambiga, is our witness here, called them the destroyer of democracy, and said the EC will not deal with Bersih, which is 84 civil society organization of 84 NGOs, will not deal with Bersih in matters related to electoral reform. Aside from the arrogance, this is a clear abdication of their role, And he said, he also labeled the opposition leader, Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim, as king of slander. Now, then they go on to say, whenever civil groups or the public criticize,
Contrary to what I'm saying, what I feel is that our role is not here to bash the EC. Our role is to look at how to improve the system. And one of the ways to improve the system is perhaps to look at the structure, the institutional structure of the EC, and how and why has it been so difficult. I tend to feel that some of the difficulties are because their hands are tied legally.
I think we will when we sum up in our submissions, maybe we'll deal with that, because what we'll do is we will look at this. We, of course, are in your hands to a great deal, because you have done a lot of study with regard to, elections and democracy and so on. But I think we'll have to evaluate all this in the light of the evidence that is has emerged. So perhaps you'd like to continue.
Yes.
Now, I just wanted to, on the question of caretaker government, if you refer to your page 79, these are your proposals with regard to caretaker government.
Yes.
And you say here at your, under 1, from the time of dissolution of Parliament or State Assembly until the time the incoming government takes office, the federal government and state government shall be a caretaker government and shall not make
election time. It was taking place more than a year before elections actually happened, if not 2 years. We were very, very alarmed. And certainly closer to the elections and over campaigning period, we had bombs and things like that, which honestly for Malaysians is a bit of a shock, because we are generally peace-loving, and we haven't seen this type of political violence. We have listed out the political violence because what we did also in the same exhibit following the code of conduct, because our pemantau was observing that, and every week or every 10 days they were issuing statements as to what kind of violence took place. So that's also contained in those statements that I mentioned just now.
Okay.
So political violence to me was the ultimate in showing what a flawed electoral system we had, because the concern was that those in power did nothing about it. Neither did the police, as far as I could remember. I don't think anybody was charged, maybe one or two, but certainly it was not contained.
Yes, you can move on to paragraph 21.
Sorry, para 21. And this, if we can put up the integrity pledge, the Prime Minister actually, and this is this is by Ms. Josie Fernandez, the then General Secretary, who's actually present here as well. Transparency, page 123, transparency flays Najib for breaching integrity pledge. BN Chairperson Najib Abdul Razak, in giving out various incentives and urging civil servants to support him, has breached the integrity pledge that he had signed. Transparency International Malaysia said today. That money is used by political parties and candidates to win votes is no secret. It has been said that election expenses are like an iceberg, only the tip is visible, etc., etc.
May I know whether other candidates
Supported.
signed an integrity pledge like this?
Yes, there were.
All of them?
Not all. Not all. But there were. But
I don't
yes.
know. I mean, I'm not sure the value of these kind of pledges. And here I see, for example, it assumed that he will be an elected representative already. Will observe the following
true.
principles during the electoral process and as elected representative. And then he's going to do all that. If he's so sure that he's going to be an elected representative, then I'm not sure whether
Just to summarize that particular point, you had Transparency, he signed a pledge with Transparency International, and Transparency International then came out shortly after that to say Najib himself, the person who signed it, had broken the pledge in a variety of ways. And then after the election, the person with whom he signed that pledge, which means that that person, who is, what is his name, Paul Lau, who must have been privy to saying that Najib breached this integrity pledge, then gets appointed to preserve integrity in the new government under the same person with whom he signed this. Is that it?
I'm not sure what that's leading to, but factually, that's correct. The sequence is correct.
No, I'm not. It's not leading to anything.
I don't think it's fair to,
I'm
because I
just-
don't think he knew, to be fair to Dato' Paul, at that point in time. That
No,
he
no.
was
He,
going-
of course, he didn't know.
He wouldn't have known.
But people. Get
But
the-
yes, it's, well, stranger than fiction, yes. Type things.
Yes, you can proceed.
I think the indelible ink, I'm not going to read everything, but I'm moving on to, I've dealt with the Election Commission. The indelible ink, I think the important point to make about the Election Commission is that they must enjoy public confidence. And I think that's key. So whoever you appoint has to continuously enjoy public confidence. And said, we've done all the tests that we need to do, etc., and you know what the history is in relation to that. But they were totally remorseless that this ink didn't work. And that is shown in some of the statements, and if I can just refer, and that to me is very worrying. That says a lot about the Commission. 149, for example. EC says, not worried about flawed indelible ink. And why? It appears in paragraph 3, and it appears quite a lot. I'm not worried about indelible ink, this is the Deputy Chair, because tomorrow you cannot vote. So what kind of a statement is that? For me, the whole point about indelible ink is you stop double voting, simple. You did not stop double voting this time because it was flawed. And what is interesting as well is there was a by-election in Kota Besut held on 24th of July 2013. We didn't get a single complaint about the indelible ink. They used it. Not a single complaint. They couldn't get it right on advance voting. They couldn't get it right on May the 5th. They got it right in July 2013. What does that say? Police report, that's it. It goes into a black hole. People will forget in 6 months because a lot of things can happen in 6 months, and that's the end of the matter. But is that right? That's my issue with this indelible ink. It is far bigger than people think it is. So that's indelible ink.
And before you leave that subject,
Yes.
you see in Kuala Besut, it only affects one constituency,
By-election.
one by-election.
Yes.
And it worked.
We
but-
didn't get complaints. I mean,
Well-
I think Dr. Zul will also, I confirmed it with Dr.
Yeah,
Zul as well.
so-
No complaints.
And
It worked.
Probably
So-
because there were no postal voters, no advance voters?
Yes.
Other than the election of officers?
And also, it only affected one constituency,
Of
so it's not going to
course,
affect.
yes,
Whereas
yes.
for the
Exactly.
general elections, it was going to change the shape of the government. So that is a critical factor.
Well, whether it changed the shape of the government, as I said, we're not concerned with, but I think we are concerned that whether it worked or not. And I think from the evidence that we have heard, it didn't work.
Yes.
Indeed, from the admission of the officials themselves, that it didn't work. So, okay. But when you put there that received no complaints, I was just wondering whether you're now,
Issued a report. So that is something that is forthcoming.
so do you want us to call on them to make this report available? Or condemn them for not doing it?
Well, we
I
can
mean,
call,
they-
you know,
I mean, as I said, we are listening here to evidence and to proposals. That's
yes.
what our terms of reference are, relating to what happened in the general elections. 13. So, when you raise something like that before us, are we expected to say something about it or not?
Yes, sorry. I would invite the panel actually to perhaps, yes, invite them to give a report, but above and beyond that is to have a proper system for international observers. If we're going to have international observers, we need to have, stipulate their terms of reference, and one of them has to be writing a report, because the whole point is to how we improve our system. So I would be interested to know what they've said, and see whether it helps us in improving the system. I feel that we've lost out because they've gone back. They came, they
Enforcement, a member of an enforcement team. And he said he couldn't do anything about whatever he saw, and all he had to do was to report to his candidate. I'm not sure that this is an enforcement team that is really by the Election Commission to look at all the offences, because we asked him, then what happens to all those pictures that we saw of monies being paid, food being given, and he said, no, that's not his function under this team.
he may be appointed by the candidate actually. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
no, this is the thing.
This one is by the Election Commission.
No, this is
Under
establishment-
27.
Yes, I know.
A.
27A, establishment of enforcement team. They establish an enforcement team, and it will then have representatives
Yes,
from the candidates.
yes.
And apparently, according to how they work, we asked this person, they go around together and they look at what goes on, and then I suppose they individually then go back, because he says, yeah, they can't do anything, because we said, look, there were cases in the area in where he was working.
If you make your proposals, you have to go beyond just the question of enforcing this section, but to add some bite to this,
Yes.
teeth to this.
Yes, and perhaps clarity.
Yes.
And also, in tandem with that would be Section 4, 5, and 3D of the Elections Act.
Yeah, sorry. In fact,
Yes.
that was the witness, Muhammad Rizwan. He said he was a member of enforcement team, and this is the tragedy. He filed an election petition because whatever he reported or whatever he saw wasn't attended to. The petition was struck off, and he had to pay 100,000. His complaints related to money bribes at 2 places, noted, and in 14 districts, not being allowed entry into polling station, inconsistent number of ballot papers tallied. That was the basis of his petition. And it was struck out, according to him, pursuant to Rules 9 and Regulation 34 of Election Officers Act. That's why I said, what is this enforcement team then? Because obviously now that fellow has to pay 100,000.
It's ridiculous.
And what does it say? And what the automatic voter registration, and you would welcome postal ballots, postal voting, and because we were told, for example, postal and advanced voting, there are 300,000 you could have 300,000 postal and advanced voters.
No, postal, we only encouraged it
To
for
get-
overseas.
But it is also now available to local. Do you
We,
know
we discourage that because there's no reason for, they can all vote
that? But
actually.
this, your discouragement does not
No, they
prevent
don't
this.
listen.
No, no.
That's true.
No, but then this
proposals.
apparently is, you see, under the Election Act, you can appoint election officers. And that election officers goes right down to the 3 ladies or number of persons who are looking after the ballot box, who ballot papers, calling out the names and so on. And as I understand it, or been made to understand, they can be postal voters. And we have heard 2 cases of one having this postal vote and he puts it in his pocket and he went there and voted again, just to show that it can be done.
Yes. Oh, we're against
So-
that. We're against that postal vote for election workers because there's no reason why they cannot actually vote on election day. These voters.
Yes.
Here, of course, some cases you need postal. Advance should be okay because it's should be just like voting on election day.
Yes.
If you have the inking, etc., it should be okay. But actually, what proposal can we make? Short of don't vote at all because the system is really bad.
No, no,
We still have to make these proposals, but we have to tighten it.
Yes.
But
And say-
I would think then it's only postal votes, as you say, overseas.
Yes, that
and
is what
not
we have.
locally. There's no basis or no reason for it, because you are putting yourselves in peril. 300 votes can be
300,000.
taken to different constituencies, and from what we've heard about the manner in which one can look at the counting and the eventual tallying of the votes, it is even
Oh, I know postal votes are totally abused here. In fact, they are almost tradable, you know. We've had reports that they're sold for money. I know that. But it's because the system is so poor. It doesn't mean it cannot work if the system is... It's a systemic problem, and that's it. But I agree that the less postal votes, the better. I do not disagree with that.
him 30% of the total number of votes of about 13 million registered voters are of questionable voters because of the various points you mentioned about addresses, male, female, whatever. So there you are. There, you already have, as I understand it, about 3 million who may be not entitled to vote or who don't exist. So that, I think, is the key to any, to electoral reform. And we cannot just put it on the Election Commission. You've got to put it on all of us, and especially the party, the candidate or the potential candidate, to keep on scrutinizing it so that it can be corrected. Because once it's been certified, you can't challenge it, as I understand it.
But that cannot be the basis on which, for me, it is entirely the burden of the Election Commission. You cannot, ordinary citizens want to go.
Was the end of that that sort of thing. So we have a more fundamental systemic problem also, because that's why I think the witness keeps talking about the duty and role, the fundamental duty and role of the Election Commission.
I'm not saying that we want to, let the Election Commission do what they like, but I think, yes, while we recommend all the tightening up of the Election Commission, change how they are constituted and so on, it still does not absolve the citizens from acting to ensure that
Yes.
the roles are of integrity,
Yes.
just as what you are doing.
Yes.
But I disagree, I beg to disagree with that, because for me, you elect, let's look at it at the government point of view. I'm a lawyer, I elect my government, I would really not want to have to watch them every day, because I really want them to do their job. I want them to do it well. I want them to do it with integrity. I don't want to have to sit here and supervise what they do, because what you do your job, I will get on with my job, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to be a watchdog. And I think most citizens don't want to be a watchdog. So similarly with the Election Commission, a lot of people don't even understand the electoral role, actually. It's really quite technical. So of course, Bersih took it on. I mean, we took it on, Murab took
The people, the first point, the starting point is that those entrusted with duties to perform, like the Election Commission, it starts with that. They have to perform their functions and they have to perform it properly. And that is, I think, the starting point. And the media, for example, must perform. But then watching the watchdog, you know, the media does not perform the function, Election Commission doesn't perform the function. So these institutions must be compelled to perform their function in accordance with the constitutional and their mandate in accordance with free and fair. So it's got to start with that. But over and above that, of course, when citizens like Dr. Ong and Dr. Lee do the crunching of numbers and tell them this, then the integrity of the Election Commission comes into question, because when this vigilance is exercised in the pursuit of liberty, what happens is that there's no response. The response is to call you king of slander and destroyer, you're destroyer of what? Destroyer of democracy.
democracy.
So you see that this kind of a role cannot be played out fully by citizens, even if they want to, like Bersih is doing, when you have a body which is, I hate to say this, which is partisan, which is biased, which doesn't fulfill its content, which has betrayed the trust of the nation. At some point there is a qualitative change, although you have done nothing to the flame. And there is a qualitative change and you have steam. And so the point that we are making is that this is part of this process, the People's Tribunal, with the people, with the representatives, that will then make that quantitative to qualitative change. And that is the value. So the logic is, Your Honor, and this is an assurance to your panel, that there is a lot hinging on the kind of recommendations that you all make, because this is what could propel qualitative change.
And I think for the foreign members of the panel, if only you had seen how involved the Malaysian people were in these elections. Our voter turnout was nearly 85%. I mean, I don't know what percentage you deduct for those who shouldn't have voted, but it's over 80% voter turnout. That's one. It's always lingered around 70 to 75. On the day itself, they took it upon themselves to secure ballot boxes, to make sure nothing funny was happening. For me, it's full marks to the Malaysian people for involvement in the 13 general elections, actually. They showed that. So involvement of the people, I think, is not a problem. They are already involved. They are invested. But, you know, they have to listen to us, as you said. I understood, because actually they've been ignoring us too. I know exactly what you mean, Your Honor, but we cannot stop, really. That's basically it, because it has to change.
Yeah. So maybe, Dato' Ambiga,
Yes.
to conclude.
Can I, sorry, before that, can I just mention 9A, and then because of recommendation?
Yes, please.
9A has to go, but in any event, I think there's an argument that 9A is void. This is where the court cannot scrutinize the role, the electoral role. That has to go. And in fact, 9A imposes a higher burden on the Election Commission, I would say. If you don't want anyone to scrutinize it, you've got to do your job better. It's as simple as that. But anyway, 9A, to me, there's a problem, because I think it violates the federal constitution. In that, under the federal constitution, only those who are registered citizens, etc., can vote. What 9A is doing is possibly allowing those who should not be voting to vote. So any provision that allows the constitutional provision to be undermined should be void. I think that's also a legal argument.
We'll be submitting on that as well with authorities and so on.
Yes, and on the role, we would want the United Nations to be involved. We've already suggested that, because they did that in Bangladesh. They cleaned up the role. It's about justice for me. That doesn't destroy a nation. That strengthens a nation. And that's how I see the People's Tribunal. What destroys the nation, as I said, is corruption, abuse of power, dishonesty. That's what destroys a nation. This is going to strengthen the nation. That's my view.
And the point, in fact, Your Honor, is a source of grave disquiet to some of us, because Tengku Adnan said that he would respond and he was waiting for an invitation, although we had already sent an invitation, and then we resent the invitation thinking that, so that there can be a comprehensive presentation of all sides, because they also filed 21 petitions or something like that. So the fact that now this is being attacked, the organization is being attacked, is really simply quite unacceptable and outrageous, and doesn't augur that well. So I just want to express my regret, because this, as we have seen, has been a tribunal that has tried to take in all views, all accounts, and would have assisted rather than make these outrageous comments. And in fact, as Dato' Ambiga has said, it's not a question of...
Yes.
As Alice and Council just mentioned, I think that's if, for example, Commissioner describe certain person, the king of liar, not certain
Yes.
person, but the leader of political party, that is against Electoral Code of Conduct. I forgot in detail, but there are 7 principles in Electoral Code of Conduct. Respect of the law, non-partisan and impartialities, avoiding conflict of interest, transparency and accountability, and do the job professionally, etc. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I was 7 years as a deputy chairman or commissioner, and it means 7 years I cannot make a statement publicly to support or criticize participant of election. Not only the government is participant of election, but all political party. 7 years, I am from the university. I used to, reporter asked me, what happened, already. I used to publicly criticize, politician or government. But since 7 years in commissioner, I am not allowed or presidential candidate or other polling station. Not that one. Not only that one. So there is a statement, don't ask and don't tell. Usually in America, don't ask and tell usually about, about homosexuality. Here, as a commissioner, don't ask, do not ask other people what party you casting vote for, or don't tell your preferences. You vote for what political party, etc., etc. This will guide the commissioner to run their job according to the law and this Electoral Code of Conduct. That's one. Number 2, according to the law, actually there's no mention that posting a postal vote or advance vote is not said specifically safe in police office. But electoral commissioner, the law gives the electoral commissioner the power to make arrangement. But in reality, the police that protect these boxes, it means the police is part of EMB, electoral management bodies, not only SPR but also police. It means police bounded by this electoral Code of Conduct.
About the politics of the country, institutions, electoral system, and we need some time to absorb this.
We too.
Maybe you too. So we will try our best to do our report. Maybe not like the ASEAN team, won't sit on our data, but we do need some time to reflect on what we have heard. This is not a time to make valedictory remarks. Certainly the Commission would like to share some thoughts with you on Friday when we meet. I hope that you will all come. The meeting will be at 2:30. The venue is to be determined, and I'm sure in the clandestine system you have of networks, all of you will find out when the meeting is. And it has been a great pleasure for us to have so many Malaysians attending our sessions, listening. I should also like to say that the idea of a People's Tribunal has been excellent. The organization has been superb. A lot of ideas have emerged, and I have no doubt whatsoever that your experience will be a source of inspiration to many, many countries. Almost every minute of being here, I have been thinking how, when I go back to my own country, I'm going to translate some of your procedures and methods, and I'm sure Kenyans would benefit. We have quite a strong and large civil society, but your work has been truly an inspiration for me. And I am very active in civil society in Kenya. I can assure you, you have given us much to think about. So I'm also glad with the idea of People's Tribunal, People's Forum, for the kind of reasons that have been expressed just now by you, by lead counsel, and even by my colleague here. Engagement has fallen on us, and whether we can live up to your high standards is something we should strive for, and hope with your encouragement achieve. I want to thank my fellow panelists for their good humor, for the very interesting exchanges we have when we retire to what the lead counsel kindly calls our chambers. And I certainly look forward very much to working with them, and we will do our best to produce a report that will truly serve the people of Malaysia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honours. In fact, I wanted the appreciation for your role, for all of your roles has already been